All right, Chair Barnett, we are live and streaming.
Live and streaming. All right, good deal. Well, good afternoon. I'm the Chair, Andy Barnett of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to our September 25th, 2025 meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub web link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen and comment live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801. Use meeting code 7663 to listen in and or to make comment live. For those of you who are with us today out there in internet land, welcome. Thanks for supporting the work that we do with your presence. To get started, we'll do a roll call of the members on the committee. So as I call your name, please come off mute and let us know that you're here, and then please go back on mute when you are not speaking. All right, here we go. Vice Chair Brian Methvin.
Here.
Scott Adams.
Here.
Alvarez Abernathy.
Here.
David Bartholomew.
Here.
Jane Kristen.
Here.
Chris Day. I don't believe Chris was able to join us today. Paul Heathman.
I'm here.
Tara Irby.
Here.
Great. Nuena Smith. And Stuart Zeiton.
Here. Here.
All right. That is the full committee. So thank you all very much. Let's see. Our first official order of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which oddly enough was August of 2024. Seems a little bit, I saw that August come up and I was like, oh, of course it's the August meeting because this is no, that's the wrong year. So can I get a motion to approve the meetings from August 2024?
I so move.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
And say something. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
Chair, I hate to do this, but actually it has to be a roll call vote. I'm sorry.
Okay, here we go. Roll call. Brian Methvin.
Yay.
Scott Adams.
Aye.
Alvarez Abernathy.
Aye.
David Bartholomew.
Aye.
Jane Kristen.
Aye.
Paul Heathman.
Aye.
Tara Irby.
Aye.
Nuena Smith is not here.
Aye.
Oh, you are here. Good to see you. All right, thanks everybody. And Sasha, thank you for keeping me on the straight and narrow. I had to go back and remember how to run a meeting since it's been a while. So evidently I forgot some parts of it. Before we dive into our one order of business today, I do just want to take a second and thank you all for your willingness to jump back onto this meeting. I want to thank all of you. I know almost every one of you, I can think of ways that you have been plugged into the housing recovery over the last year, and I'm incredibly grateful for the ways that you found to put your expertise to work during the time that AHAC was not meeting. And again, it's incredibly gratifying. I was a little bit nervous when we put this out that I would get a whole bunch of people saying, AHAC what? And but you're all here and you're all ready to find a way to plug back in. And I'm really excited to hear about what some of those new ways will be from Nikki. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to extend my gratitude as the chair of this committee and on behalf of our community for the ways that you've plugged in for the last year and for your willingness to jump back in today. So with if there's nothing else, Nikki, I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation about the new recovery board structure and what AHAC's role might look like going forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. Nikki Reed, the Community and Economic Development Director for the department here. So what I was thinking is that I'm going to share an overview of the Recovery Board framework tailored to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee here. There is a request to have a conversation around who from this committee will migrate and serve on the Housing Recovery Board and the Economic Recovery Board. So we'll get into that. But and Andy, I was thinking I would turn it back over to you at the end to really facilitate that conversation. So bear with me. I'm going to go through some of the slides to walk us through that, and then I expect we'll have a good conversation around the next steps. So what you're seeing here are the 4 recovery boards that have been established by the city. These are temporary boards really to support the overall recovery from Helene. And they are aligned with Council's recovery priorities. The idea behind these boards is that they will hold regular meetings, but have a set time in which they will set to work. So that's going to last until June 30, 2027. So a time limited understanding to really help us through recovery. That's the housing recovery boards, the rest of the boards there. The existing advisory boards, of which AHAC is one of those, will continue to provide expertise, community input, and develop policy recommendations on an as-needed basis. So Sasha and I, together with Andy, we're working right now a lot on looking at the overall work plan for AHAC, and hope to be coming to you with that soon. But know that that's really how we're seeing the delineation of duties between housing recovery and AHAC and the other recovery boards here. So we'll get into that. And just so you know, the quasi-judicial and technical boards have resumed their regular meeting schedules for those boards. So I'll go on to the next slide. So let's get into a little bit of the structure. So how we envision these structures of the recovery boards is that they will have no more than 11 members. And then up to 7 of the members of the recovery boards will be appointed from the existing chairs, vice chairs, or their designees of current advisory boards. So that's something that we're certainly wanting to talk about today. In addition to that, 4 to 5 members of the recovery boards will be appointed by council from the community at large. The work of these boards will be supported by staff. I am going to be the staff liaison for the Housing Recovery Board. These meetings will be streamed online, accessible to the public. They will have regularly scheduled meetings, and the work plans will be based on council committee assignments and needs. Because I've been already thinking about this a lot, I see the direct connection, of course, between the Housing and Community Development Committee. So welcome, Vice Mayor. I thought I saw her here today. And so she is our chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'm anticipating a very strong linkage between the Housing Recovery Board and HCD, as well as the continued linkage with AHAC. Okay, the next slide. So this slide really wants to demonstrate how the designees from our existing advisory boards will track onto their roles within the recovery boards. So I really want to highlight here, we're seeing the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee appointees show up on the Economy Recovery Board and the Housing Recovery Board, right? And so you'll see that other boards have also been assigned to those 2 committees. So the Asheville Downtown Commission will appoint someone from their existing commission to join the Housing Board, as well as the Human Relations Commission, Neighborhood Advisory Committee, Noise Advisory Board. So those committees will appoint someone to join the Housing Recovery Board. And then the same goes for the Economy Board, Infrastructure Board, and the People and Environment. So what you're seeing is how we are migrating the participants from the advisory boards onto our recovery board. So again, this group really is looking today to advise on who from this team will join the Economy Recovery Board and who from this team will join the Housing Recovery Board, noting that your peers will also be coming from the other committees as shown here. Okay, in the next slide, this really serves to outline the scope. And again, the scope is often really something that is translated from council's overall visions and goals, and then how that tracks on to the scope of the recovery boards. So I'll share these. So the first is to provide input to City Council on policy recommendations that advance post-disaster housing stability efforts. Second is input to City Council on policy recommendations that support temporary and permanent housing solutions for displaced residents. Input to City Council on policy recommendations that support the development of strategies to proactively address future displacement events. And then support City Council by helping residents navigate post-disaster housing challenges by communicating resources and funding opportunities through each of the members' respective networks. So really, when I look at this scope, you can see that it is really focused on recovery from the disaster and then how we shape policy for stability efforts, really to prevent against future disasters. So that is really the theme that I am working with regards to the Housing Recovery Board. You'll note too, the other part of this and the other true opportunity that we have with these boards is how do we kind of leverage this board as a network to really share out information, share out funding opportunities, share out your understanding or the committees or the recovery board's understanding around certain processes and opportunities that the city has, and really just be able to be that megaphone to make sure that our community and our citizens are hearing what's going on, hearing what's happening specifically at the city and how to plug in or be a part of that. So really, again, looking at this specific scope for the Housing Recovery Board. So what I'll do now is also give you some insight into the Economy Recovery Board scope. So again, thinking about those two appointments there. So you'll see, again, providing input to council on policy recommendations that promote post-disaster economic recovery, rebuilding and revitalizing the local economy. Input to council on policy recommendations that expand local economic resilience and diversification. I know that's something that came out of high interest to our community post-disaster. And then policy recommendations that emphasize land management best practices and strategic use of both city-owned and newly acquired land to promote placemaking, community vitality, and sustainable long-term growth. There is a page 2 for economic recovery. So their scope continues, providing input to City Council on policy recommendations that support workforce development programs that build workforce capacity and enhance the local economy by creating a sustainable economic base. Input on ways to expand the city's contractor pool to improve capacity for recovery and resilience projects. Supporting council through input on ways to strengthen outreach to businesses. Again, you're hearing that kind of megaphone amplifying the city's message there. And support for small and underrepresented businesses. And then support City Council by helping businesses navigate post-disaster recovery challenges, communicating needed resources, and then communicating those funding opportunities through each member's respective networks. So you're seeing how this is similar to the Housing Recovery Board with that emphasis on input into policy recommendations, and then again that need and desire to have these committees really amplify the city's message and the city's opportunities that we'll have. In my interpretation, I really see that coalescing with our community development, CDBG DR funding opportunities that are on the horizon, and really how we ensure that everyone understands those processes, everyone understands the opportunities and can plug into those resource opportunities as they come through. The next 2 slides talk about infrastructure recovery, so I'm going to go over these just for general awareness. And 2, know that, of course, our task today is to assign AHAC members to the housing and economic recovery. That also does not inhibit anyone from applying to these recovery boards if you are so interested in doing so. So I'll just go through these as well. For the infrastructure recovery board scope, that team will be providing input to City Council on policy that promotes the strategic rebuild of the damaged infrastructure with that focus on long-term resilience, input on policy recommendations that improve water system resilience, flood management, and stormwater infrastructure, so important key civic infrastructure to reduce risk, providing input to City Council on recovery plans for the city's parks, greenway and recreation infrastructure, prioritizing these large projects, but then also providing input on long-term resilience measures and park enhancements. And this, of course, is speaking to a lot of the projects that we have for the rebuilding of, for example, the French Broad River Park Greenway system and park system there. And then lastly, really supporting City Council by leveraging partnerships and funding programs that promote resilience and sustainable infrastructure investments, again, amplifying that message there. The last recovery board scope is for people and environment. So again, providing input on policy recommendations that strengthen the city's ability to prepare for and respond to climate-related disasters. Input that supports environmental sustainability, recognizing the impact and role of Asheville's natural resources in recovery, and then support City Council by consulting existing resources and tools to include the known climate vulnerability considerations into policy and programming recommendations. So more to that, providing input to Council on ways to support neighborhood level resilience and preparedness efforts that build community capacity to withstand future challenges. Providing input on ways to support residents recovering from disaster while strengthening long-term community resilience, and then supports Council by ensuring that residents feel informed, engaged, and connected to recovery resources. All right, so a lot of content there, but really just trying to highlight the focus of recovery throughout all of these boards, but really tailored to the specific focus area of each board. But that strong element of input onto policy recommendations, and again, that counterbalance with helping promote the city's messaging, information sharing, and consistent notification of opportunities for everyone to get involved to the members' networks. Overall next steps. So really what we're hoping to accomplish here is for the 2 existing advisory board appointments to be made. That deadline is Sunday, September 28th for all of the advisory boards to provide that information. These assigned recovery board seats are reserved for the chair, vice chair, or their designees. So that's what we'll get into today. And again, current advisory board members can apply for any of the open recovery board seats. Or attend the recovery board meetings the same as any member of the public. So whether or not you are elected by this body to serve on the recovery board, there's also the opportunity that you can apply for that as well. And then the recovery boards will be appointed at City Council's meeting on Tuesday, October 14th, and then will run through regularly scheduled meetings until June 30th, 2027. So with that designated time area to really focus on the nature of recovery for the focus of these boards. Okay, really wanting to think about the proposed structure for the advisory boards. This is really talking about the integration of how these boards are going to connect to our council committees that then also feed up to City Council. So again, noting that the heavy emphasis of the boards is around the policy recommendations, really trying to look at how both the recovery boards and the advisory boards function in that structure. So pertaining to AHAC, the proposed structure for the existing advisory boards then is to be on demand. That is really based on when the when the advisory board AHAC is assigned a task. And I'll share that, as I mentioned earlier, Sasha and I have already been working with Andy on the specific assignment for AHAC. Of course, I think back to last year in August, that was really on the heels of the affordable housing plan, for example. And so there was a lot of good content that came out of this group's efforts to complete that affordable housing plan. And now really, how do we engage this advisory board on furthering that plan and implementing the plan? So we're already talking about certain policies where we will need to have AHAC be the leading advisor on those policies to really help those get across the way. For example, one thing that we're talking about right now is the home repair policy. That is something that Sasha and I have talked about that's already on our work plan for this year. So how does that migrate into AHAC's work plan, and what does that look like? So it's just a sneak peek there. So just to really couch this in the overall strategy for all the other advisory boards, is just to acknowledge that council created these advisory boards to meet on demand when a task is assigned by council committee, or department directors. Advisory boards must get approval from council or a council committee to work on items that are not assigned. That's really, for me, like, because we have some very explicit tasks for AHAC to work on, we really want to focus in on those. And then lastly, we want to just ensure that alignment of the board's work with the council priorities and the work that we're already doing within our organizational work plan, so that we're all working in alignment together. So more to come on that, but know that that we're working on that sneak peek home repair. This goes into a little bit of the avenues for board members to propose new tasks. Members of boards that are meeting on an as-needed basis have the following pathways to propose new tasks that have not been directed by City Council. They can appeal to their board representative on the Helene recovery boards to present that idea to their respective recovery board. They can communicate the idea to council committee. They can communicate the idea to City Council, or ask their board chair to present the idea to the department director, who provides the support to their board. So again, this is really on how to examine work tasks that may be outside of the scope of work that we will delineate with AHAC together. Okay. Any questions? I think that's the end of the slide. Again, the concept here was really to give everyone a thorough overview of the scopes of all of the Helene recovery boards, really to identify the specific task at hand today that we're asking for this board to designate one member to housing recovery, one member to the economic recovery, and then, like I said, give a little bit of a sneak peek into how we expect AHAC to continue their work. But with that, I think I'll turn it over to Andy to facilitate questions or facilitate the conversation around the appointments. And
Great,
Sasha may have something to add. Sorry, Andy.
Just really quickly, somebody was listening, and just to clarify, if you volunteer to be on a recovery board, you're still on AHAC, right? Just want to make it extra clear. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna try to summarize what, Nikki, I think as people are thinking about where they might want to serve, it looks like there's going to be a fairly full scope of work for this committee in terms of direct tasks that are assigned to AHAC, and then a pretty full lift on the Housing Recovery Board. So there'll be plenty of work to go around. But that work will be happening more or less concurrent. Okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So if you're offering to serve on the Housing Recovery Board, you are in effect adding something to your plate, because unlike maybe some of the other advisory boards, we have some tasks that we for sure are going to be working on AHAC. Okay. I see Brian's hand raised. I see Paul's hand raised. We'll just go in that order. Brian, your question.
What can you share the task that AHAC is going to be assigned?
We're still finalizing that, but I think we're working on the overall timeline. And so right now we're very much thinking in the next quarter of work that we would be committed to. So the home repair policy is the number one item that we're currently in conversation, me, Sasha, and Andy, really trying to identify, because right now, let me just to be clear, we do not have a home repair policy for city controlled funds. And so we are wanting to develop that policy and then work with this board to finalize that policy so that we can implement a home repair program using bond funds. So that is something that we've already earmarked as an explicit task that we want to engage AHAC with.
Nikki, along those lines, when I was looking back at the minutes from our August meeting of last year, I mean, obviously a lot of things have changed, but one of our next big work plan tasks this time last year was around the rental registry project that was identified in the affordable housing plan. Is that something that you anticipate picking back up, or is that going somewhere else? Is that now lower priority than home repair due to the changing in housing conditions due to Helene?
I'm curious, Sasha, if you have an update on that, because I think there's a lot of community partnerships at play there. So, Sasha, do you have insights on that?
Sure. I mean, there's been a very, very small group of us meeting once in a while just to kind of trying to keep something moving. But in that, we've been working with Thrive, Just Economics, a representative of the COC, Emily Ball, who's our homeless strategy lead here, and myself. We've been meeting, and definitely, I guess that's a good point. Like at some point, we would want to bring that back to AHAC and maybe get some involvement from AHAC. We should, but we don't have a timeline for that right now.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fine. That makes sense. Paul, you had a question?
Yeah, did I read or hear that AHAC will no longer meet regularly and just on a project basis? And what does that look like? Should we expect to meet monthly?
I think that's a great question. And because right now what I'm trying to identify is that balance of both the Housing Recovery Board and of AHAC. And so what I'm thinking is like both of those boards will at least meet quarterly. And right now, given the workload that we're looking at, it makes sense to me that it might be every other month. So what that means is that the Housing Recovery Board would meet one month, AHAC would meet the other month. But I think we can guarantee that both boards will meet at least quarterly, if not by every other month, bi-monthly.
Thank you. That's helpful to know just in terms of the level of commitment. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on to Paul's? I mean, again, thinking about workload, and I think at least initially the thought was that chairs or their designee would go onto the recovery board. Is it realistic to think that given the scope of what you're thinking AHAC might need to do in the coming months, that it's realistic for either the chair or the vice chair to be able to serve effectively on both committees?
That's a great question, and I don't know. I'm curious what others may think, because I don't know.
I think in our case, maybe it's unique, but Andy, you just have your finger on the pulse so much of what's going on. I feel like maybe public and private and just the whole. So in our case, I feel like you being able to move back and forth between the two, if it's not too much in terms of workload, it's ideal. I don't know if that would be the case for other advisory committees, but for us, it seems.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to kind of figure, I mean, the reason I have my finger on the pulse of so much is because I'm already plugged in so many different places. So I'm trying to figure out if I can serve well in yet one more role. So, but thank you for that vote of confidence, Paul. Brian?
Yeah, so it would strike me if these committees are going to meet every other month, you're going to have to either have very long meetings, get a policy recommendation done, or have work groups that are meeting outside of that, because you're going to meet for an hour and a half, 2 hours every other month. It's going to be really long time frames to develop policy.
And right now, what I had in mind was 1 hour and a half meetings. So to your point, that's what we're thinking. I mean, that is.
Yeah, I don't see that as a realistic, effective mechanism. You're going to introduce a topic, people aren't going to have time to think about it and be thoughtful about their recommendations, and have no time to do research on anything. So then, if not, then you're waiting another 60 days before you come back to meet and present researched ideas and then try to coalesce around them. Just seems to me it would take you 6 months to get anything done in that environment, unless you're going off and getting subgroups of those things to work in work groups like we were doing previously on AHAC.
Well, and I think the desire really is to be very clear around the input for policy recommendations. So part of what I think is going to be important is ensuring that we do a touch point to understand before we begin the home repair policy, for example, that we have a convening with AHAC. We hear about what's important in a home repair policy. We hear about whether it's from lived experience for people who have been receiving those kinds of services, or agencies that have implemented those, like really having a robust conversation around tell us what we need to understand before we begin, tell us what we need to understand as we begin to draft the policy. But then we do see that staff will be in the position of drafting the policy and then bringing it back to AHAC and subsequent meetings for their review. So again, I think what we're hoping to do is really right size the focus of AHAC so that we can have effective meetings. But we're still, like I said, we're still trying to sort that out. So I appreciate that feedback.
So in order for that to be effective, I mean, some people like Andy have a deep knowledge of home repair policies, others might not. So you'd have to give us a lot of pre-work prior to the first meeting to discuss it. Because if we just come in cold, you go, what should home repair be? And, without us having a chance to research it and digest a bunch of materials, and I just don't see that as an effective mechanism for the committee to meet. If people aren't smart on the issue, you're just getting knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, Nikki, is there anything, there's nothing in the changes to the structure of AHAC that would prevent us from using the same kind of working group approach that we were using before? If that made sense.
I guess I think, I'm sorry, Nikki, I'm going to just jump in here. I think the concern is around work groups is that staff was never present and so things were happening and staff wasn't aware and not always looped in. And I think it is possible that, definitely hear you, Brian, and understand what you're saying. I do think it's possible that in between meetings that maybe staff is consulting with smaller groups, of AHAC on certain questions. And maybe there's homework to be done in between meetings. I think we're not ready to commit to work groups at this point. But I do think there will be work happening in between meetings, to your point. And we're still thinking that piece through for sure.
But the legality of it, there's nothing about the new structure that makes it outside of the rules. As long as we don't have quorum, we can meet separately to work on specific projects that we would recommend maybe for policy.
I guess technically that may be true.
Okay. I don't know. I think I hear Brian, and I don't know who else feels this way, but we haven't had a lot of progress. There's lots of reasons why we haven't had a lot of progress over the last little bit, right? Of course, the storm, and it'd be really nice to see some traction. And I feel like we're at this moment. This is quite a moment where there's maybe some money and some interest and some momentum, and let's get things done. I think everybody wants to get some stuff done here.
I appreciate that. And again, like what I would like to do is take that enthusiasm, but track it onto some specific targets that we have. And again, that's why I'm really stressing the home repair policy, because I think it's something that we can all align ourselves with. So
Other questions?
Nikki or Sasha, it just seems like there's an effort to kind of, I don't know, reduce the influence or the work specific to the advisory committee. And so can you talk about, what was necessarily problematic? I think you alluded to it a little bit, Sasha, in terms of, work going forth that had not necessarily been vetted by staff or, approved. What's that issue? What was that issue?
I mean, I don't know that we're trying to water down influence for sure. I would not say that, but I think we just kind of like going back to what Nikki just said, we just want to make sure that any work that's happening is in service to the tasks assigned. I've been with AHAC for about maybe 3.5 years, and there were 2 work groups, and they would met. I don't know what actually came out of those. I think the Connect one, maybe a little bit more, something substantial came out of that one. The other one, I never got invited to those meetings. I don't know what happened. I don't know that anything came out of them. We want to make sure that your time is used well and that it's actually in service to what we're trying to get done. And we just need to be careful of staff capacity too. We just want to make sure that we're able to attend meetings that are happening. And so in some ways, we're kind of using the COC, the continuum of care, a little bit as a model. They do have, I guess, subcommittees, and several of you are on those, but staff is always present at those meetings, I believe. Like there's not meetings happening where staff is not there. So that, staff is kind of the glue, making sure that what that committee is talking about actually gets into, what's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, but to your point, Jane, put so much effort into, we were so successful in that Connect group of doing some community engagement and getting some really, really valuable information. And yeah, we did that as a working group on our own. So I don't know. I hope that would be considered. And I would echo what I hear Tara say too. Like it felt like before we made recommendations that fell on deaf ears, and now maybe we're being asked just to make less recommendations, meet less frequently. And I don't think it's anybody on this call, but I don't know. I know members of council. I know some of them have a deep understanding of development and real estate and housing, and some of them don't. If I were on council, I sure would want us, this group of experts here, to make recommendations in housing.
Can I step in for just a second? Hey, Paul.
Hey.
So I thought when we did this pilot before the storm where HCD and AHEC kind of worked in tandem, I thought that went really well. So I'm curious to hear from you all if you disagree with that assessment, because I believe, at least from HCD's standpoint, our goal is to continue that kind of symbiotic relationship. But I'm curious to hear your impressions on how HCD and AHEC work together. Or anyone else if you disagree, because again, my perception may be totally different than yours and different than staff's. But again, I thought we were moving forward well together.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an example of good work being done. But I guess we're just sitting here having not done any of that in the last year. And like, again, there's lots of reasons for that, but that's, it feels like a drop in the bucket, I guess. But yeah, if that's something we can all come together on and continue that work, it just feels like the presentation we just saw is like, well, you're not going to meet regularly anymore, and we'll just tell you when you're going to meet, and we'll tell you what projects to think about. And I don't know. I'm being honest here, too honest probably.
No, it's very helpful for me to hear. What I can tell you is HCD doesn't have an interest in sidelining this group in particular.
I'm sure not.
So I think we contemplated that when there were issues that we felt that we really needed your help on, we would be coming forward. So in my mind, AHEC was probably going to be one of the most active committees. And so if anything differently has been relayed to you, let me say that, again, it's our intention as HCD to work closely with you continually. I think part of the issue, as Sasha alluded to, may be staff capacity. But I don't think that should hold up your work. I believe I have a good relationship with Andy, and I believe I can get on the phone and call him and say, what are your thoughts on this? And can some of y'all get together and ponder this? Just as simple as that, just community. That is at least my desire. But again, I want to hear from other people too, if you're feeling almost like you're being discarded, because we can have that conversation one-on-one too, if you like.
Well, I mean, I think it's hard. So I keep trying to stay on what's been presented to us, because on one hand, I respect like knowing how you envision using AHAC, because I think for having been on AHAC for quite some time, that's always been sort of frustrating. And so I don't want to discuss things that aren't, open for debate. But if you're saying, well, you want to know how does it feel? Like, I don't think most of us feel great about not having met over the last year. A lot of big decisions have been made already, including how to divide up the money. And so while
Decisions have not been made. One,
well,
we're still, you're talking about the bond? We haven't made.
And I understand that those things can still be shifted at least by $5 million here and there. And like I said, I really don't want to use this valuable time to go and state my opinion about things that are already decided and have already been done. But we do feel, I think a lot of us feel, I feel like we should have been meeting regularly, and we are understanding that capacity throughout the city has been stretched thin, and that there are really good reasons why we haven't, and there are good reasons why you want to meet less frequently, and why you want to tell us what you need from us. And I'm really okay with that in the short term. But if you're asking, do I think the voices in this room, should we be part of the discussion? Should there be more heard from us and more involvement? I mean, I think I do feel that way. But I also, I know we have to appoint somebody, and with regards to AHAC, like, I think we should meet on a monthly basis if there's capacity for that. I think informing both our appointees on what's going on will be helpful. I think it would be helpful for us to have regular meetings. But if we can't, I think quarterly is better than, not meeting for a year.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Vice Mayor. Are there other thoughts or questions that you want to put on the table before we talk about appointments? I have a couple that are a little more kind of down in the weeds, so maybe they're not too far down in the weeds. But I noticed on the slide that showed the different advisory boards that tracked onto the recovery committees, that the slide before that said that there would be 7 appointees to each committee from the advisory boards. Oh, it says up to 7. Okay. Sorry for not being able to read. But I noticed that the committees tracking onto the Housing Recovery Board, there are 5 as opposed to 7 onto the Economy Committee. I was a little bit surprised when we got the final information for this meeting that we had one appointment each to housing and economy rather than 2 appointments onto the housing committee. I'd love to know a little bit more about what went into that decision making. I do feel like the housing perspective, we've done a great job on this committee of building up a really robust committee with great expertise around housing, and it feels like that's getting a little bit more diffuse than I thought it was going to within the recovery board structure. So just Nikki, can you or perhaps Vice Mayor Mosley, like, just explain a little bit of the thinking of kind of having this in different places?
I'll just share that, you know, I'm not quite sure what that was, the thinking was around that, but I do think we can take that information back if there is a strong recommendation to have these 2 members sit on the housing board. We can take that back. The ultimate decision goes to council on the October 14th meeting. So I would say that if that is the strong recommendation, we can certainly take that up. I am supposing that the concept was really just to have a mix of representation throughout the recovery boards, just for that reason, to have that diversity of opinions, a diversity of representation show up on the recovery boards. But I certainly understand that perspective as well. I mean, for example, Chris Day, not here, but if he had been, you know, interested in serving on the infrastructure committee, and that was something that showed up on this framework, I could see how that would make sense, right? So, but nonetheless, like, again, if that is something that you would like to add in addition to the appointments, I'm happy to pass that along. But I'm not clear on the exact thinking, other than to demonstrate that diversity of and cross section of committees aligning with the advisory boards.
And I think that's the sort of the balance between a diversity of perspective and enough specialization, and that the committee can actually be effective. Will that mean, given that there are 5 advisory boards tracking onto housing, there'll be 5 appointees, will that increase the number of at-large seats onto that committee to keep the total numbers balanced, or is it still, so you have a committee like the economic committee that has 7 appointments, and then 4 to 5 members appointed at large. Like, will every committee have 11 to 12 members, or is it?
I don't think so. I think this is written in such a way to be flexible. So, because it for me, what I'm seeing here is it's very much up to, no more than. So that really represents the cap and not necessarily the minimum. So I think there is some variability there that could happen.
Okay.
So it's running long. It started a little late. So.
Alvarez, do you have a question, or thank you.
Sorry, I heard that he was on the phone, so I lovingly muted you. Okay.
I have one more quick question, and then we can talk about membership. In the list of objectives for the Housing Recovery Committee, the third point was around providing input around future displacement events. And the other 4 definitely look, you know, they're a little bit more around how we recover from the last storm. This one seems to be how we prepare for the next, you know, for some future event. Thinking about future displacement events, the water seems to get muddy between that and what was laid out in the affordable housing plan around displacement. And so I would just like to flag that as a place where we're going to have to be really careful around how we delineate the work between these 2 committees.
I hear that 100%. Sasha and I were actually talking about this the other day, because yes, like when we see displacement on this slide, my interpretation is it's displacement as a result of a natural disaster, an emergency, flooding, et cetera. But I know we have a robust conversation that also occurs at our HCD committee around displacement of Asheville residents, whether it's cultural, social, economic, that type of displacement that we have, and Vice Mayor just brought this to HCD's meeting this past September, and we have, you know, continued work on that. And again, in my perspective as well, that's where we see AHAC, you know, looking at the displacement, anti-displacement strategies that are relative to the affordable housing plan and that conversation that we had at HCD. This displacement, to your point, Andy, we need to be careful to ensure that we delineate that this was really talking about as a result of disasters.
Yeah. And I think it's, you know, physical displacement due to a dwelling being in a floodplain often like overlaps with cultural or economic displacement pressures, just because of the way the housing market works for low-income residents. So just, I'm just flagging that this is going to be one of those, you know, I learned early on in real estate development to always pay attention to the places where there were a lot of extra marks on the architect's concept drawing, because those were going to be the hard places to build down the road. And so this is one of those like, this looks like one of the places that we're going to be talking about for a while. So, all right, any other questions or thoughts before we talk about how we want to staff these two committees? I guess I do have one more. Nikki, what would, if we wanted to propose 2 seats from AHAC onto the Housing Recovery Board, what would the process be for that? What sort of action would this group need to take?
I think you could take formal action today, and then I will take that back.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's switch gears then and talk about our appointments to these committees. I would love to first just get a sense of folks who are interested in serving on either one of the recovery boards. If you've given this some thought and you'd like to be considered for one of these slots, can you let me know? Go ahead, Brian.
I'm interested in serving on the Housing Committee, but not the Economic Development Committee.
Okay. David, are you?
Yeah, I'd be interested in serving on the Housing and Long-Term Recovery Group, but that would be the only one.
Okay. Any others? Anyone interested in putting their hat in the ring for the Economic Committee?
This is Scott Adams. I would be interested in that committee, as I've seen that it's, I believe I've seen it on a PEDE, Planning and Economic Development, or Planning Economic Development Environment Committee, that is focused on a comprehensive plan and unified development ordinance update. And those are both areas of expertise and interest for me.
Okay.
Yes, that would be the right place for you, Scott. I agree.
Others?
I was distracted from one of my a co-worker. I apologize for that.
That's okay. Alvarez, do you have, the question was, do you have interest in being considered for either the Housing or Economic Recovery Committees?
Yeah, the housing. Yes.
Okay.
I have a question, Andy, or more broadly, given the scheduling and what we're thinking in terms of when the regular group or the regular committee with AHAC will meet, whether that be quarterly or whether that be bi-monthly, it seems that to Brian's point, policy development, that, you know, that may be all that we are tasked with over the course of a year. Because an hour and a half quarterly or even bi-monthly could take up that time, and that would be all the work. So just trying to kind of get my head around if that is reasonable, or am I thinking reasonably as it relates to that? Because, you know, just home repair over the course of the year, and that's all we're tasked with. That's all we're on demand for. And then trying to consider if I feel like that my time would be better spent on the recovery board. I'm just trying to get a sense.
Well, and I want to provide just, I didn't want to make it that home repair was all we're going to be doing. I know that that is an early task that Sasha and I have discussed because it's something that's really needed. There also is some needs that we have related to the Housing Trust Fund policy, especially as it relates to home ownership, down payment assistance. And then as we referenced earlier, it's become conversation at HCD around anti-displacement and how we approach that work. And so while I'm very clear on the home repair policy, I don't want to lock ourselves into thinking that that is perhaps the only thing that this committee will be doing. But for me, that's an early priority. So, and I'm trying to think in like the next quarter of work and really starting to chart out that timeline now. But so forgive me if I overemphasize that. I was really hoping to use it as an example to demonstrate what kind of work
Yeah,
that we're
I don't think it was overemphasized, Nikki. I just, you know, when we started discussing as to how often we would meet and how long those meetings would be, I think to Brian's point, it will be, you know, probably about all, depending on, you know, how deeply we are involved in it and not being able to meet outside in work groups, that it could be, if we met quarterly, all that we got to over the course of a year.
Yeah, Tara, kind of the way I'm thinking about this, and it goes back a little bit to what Vice Mayor Mosley had said about the way we were working last year. We were sort of tracking a lot of, you know, some of our work plan was what came from HCD, and then we had sort of a large project around the affordable housing plan that we sort of initiated. I think what I would the way I'm looking at this going forward is, you know, those big projects that we initiate are kind of off the table for right now because we're focused on the housing recovery, and staff and council is focused on that. That flow of projects from council to AHAC, you know, that would be our work. So if you kind of think about those two different streams of work that AHAC has tackled, you know, in recent years, like stuff that we generate versus stuff that we're asked to weigh in on. That is sort of the way I'm thinking about the distinction going forward. Nikki, does that feel like I'm capturing that well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other folks who are thinking they might like to be considered on one or the other of these, or the other of these committees. Okay, so just to recap, I have Scott volunteering for the AHAC slot on the Economic Recovery Committee, and then we have Brian, David, and Alvarez who are interested in serving on the Housing Recovery Committee. I think we can make a quick decision on the Economic Committee and say anyone, would anyone like to make the motion that we designate Scott Adams as AHAC's representative on the Economic Recovery Committee?
I'll make it.
So
I move.
Oops.
I move to nominate Scott for our economic representative.
And I will second.
Second. Okay, we'll do a quick roll call vote on that just to round things out. Brian?
Yes.
Scott?
I suppose yes. I didn't realize I could vote for myself.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just going down the list. And like I said,
No worries.
it's been a year since I've
We
facilitated.
need a yes from you, Scott.
Yes.
Alvarez?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Tara?
Yes.
Duena,
Yes.
Stuart.
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes, so that's a unanimous vote for Scott for the Economic Recovery Committee. David, you've got a question?
Oh, well, I guess we need to finish the votes. Do we?
I don't know. It depends on what your question is.
So I was gonna, with regards to the housing and long-term recovery group, I would support Brian and Alvarez's us recommending them as AHAC appointees and an additional recommendation that they accept 2. I probably will apply for an at-large one anyway, but I feel like this body is very well represented by Brian Alvarez, and I'm happy to withdraw my nomination for an AHAC appointed seat to the long-term recovery group.
Okay. Any other comment there?
Andy, so you are not seeking a position on the Housing Recovery Board?
I would serve, but I am also willing to defer that to other folks on this committee, given that it sounds like there'll be, duties related to the, chairing AHAC that will keep me plugged in. But I would serve if that is I just don't want to displace other folks who have an interest in serving on that committee.
I mean, I would honestly, I think you're more qualified than myself to serve on that committee. So if you'd be willing to do both, I think that would be ideal. So I don't know how others feel.
I just assumed that Andy would be one of the members, so I guess I feel like I would like to see that.
And I think for continuity's sake, that might be, a better way forward in terms of Andy serving for both.
Okay.
I guess I would propose a consideration in relationship to what Andy was talking about, that perhaps we figure out a temporary structure within AHAC itself to alleviate a bit of Andy's burden within it, so that he can more fully participate in the recovery board. And I guess I'm thinking of that as being temporary until, I forget if it was June 27 or whenever it was. Are you understanding what I'm proposing?
Let me see if I can put some different words to that. Would you, are you suggesting that I serve on the recovery board and step down as the chair of AHAC so that someone else can serve?
No,
no.
If that's what you'd like, then I endorse whatever you feel like works for you. But what I'm saying is that we adapt a temporary structure to fill in some of your duties on the AHAC board during the time that you're serving on the Housing Recovery Board.
Okay.
I'm not.
And it's been a little while, but it's Brian, are you still the vice chair here at AHAC?
Yes. Last time I checked.
So
okay.
I appreciate what Tyra said. I didn't want to be presumptuous in terms of asking you, Brian, but I guess that's a logical place for some of the burden to be shifted off of Andy's shoulders within our committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to even, and this is not something to get into today, but to maybe consider, I don't know if our bylaws or our governing documents would allow us to consider co-vice chairs, but I will eventually term off the committee and term out of the chair role, and it would be great to be building up a bench of folks who are ready to step into both the chair and vice chair roles at that time. So maybe that's a way to get at what you're talking about, Stuart, and that's a conversation for a future meeting. But I appreciate you raising that as a concern, because it's a concern of mine about serving on both, or chairing this board and serving on that board, especially with kind of an unclear, description of what the workload might be.
I guess my main point is that I feel more confident with your investment in the recovery board, and feeling like if that's at the sacrifice of investment in our board, so be it. That's what we need, both us as individuals on this board and us as residents in the city. I think that would serve us better. Thank
I
you.
also think that's an issue we might be able to just handle as we go, depending on the workload that comes about between these two committees. I don't think it's quite apparent to me at the time exactly how much time and effort will go into either one of these committees until we actually see the scope of work and assignments that come out and the meeting frequencies.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm happy to step up and help on either one of the committees. So.
Yeah. And Brian, you've always been great to do that as a co-chair in the past. So thank you. All right, I'm going to take David's motion and see if I can break it into two different pieces. The first would be, would this committee, would we like to move to request an additional appointed seat from AHAC onto the Housing Recovery Board?
And
Nikki,
before,
yeah.
sorry, I just have to interrupt because I may have misunderstood, but in the prior discussion around this, what I tracked was that rather than
instead of the economic development, so we can't have three.
Well, because I want to be consistent across all the committees, so I don't know if we can do something different. So if you all do support the position on the Economic Recovery Board, which sounded unanimous, then I would recommend one person.
One person, okay.
And then if anyone,
and the others can apply at large for the Housing Recovery Board.
absolutely, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
But we're not sure on how the total number of at-large positions that may be available for that board.
Correct. That's what I'm assuming, is that because the selection from different committees was lesser than the others, there might be more at-large seats. And again, council will make that decision. So your resume is going to look good if you're coming from AHAC, I think. So, but yes, I think just to follow protocol, we would look for one nomination.
And it seems like you could also just suggest to council or request that they strongly consider another AHAC member or more. But it's up to them. But it's up to them. Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. Then we're down to selecting our, Brian, you have your hand raised.
So I was about to say, what I think might make a reasonable motion would be that we nominate Amy Barnett to be our representative on the Housing Recovery Board, and that we request that council pull additional members from AHAC who apply to fill the at-large seats.
All right. Do I hear a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. I guess we're recording this, so but I don't have to worry about it. We got the motion down. Okay. Is everybody clear on the motion before we vote? It is to designate me as the Housing Recovery Board representative from AHAC, and to request to council that they give consideration to filling the at-large seats on the Housing Recovery Board from members of AHAC, such as may apply. All right. Are we ready to vote? Any other discussion? We have a motion. We got a second from Stuart. Any further discussion? All right, I will do a roll call then. Myself, aye. Brian?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Alvarez,
Aye.
Jane,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Tara,
Aye.
Buena,
Aye.
and Stewart.
Aye.
Did I miss anybody? I was going from memory this time. Okay. All right, then we have done the business that we need to do. We'll turn it over for, unless there's anything else, we'll turn it over for public comment. Sasha, did we have any public comment that came in early?
Just a minute, let me refresh. See if there's, oh, we did not have any come in by email. There's no one in the queue waiting to make comments, so.
All right. Sounds good. Well, if there is no further business for this committee, take a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
All right.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Aye.
Thank you all again.
Aye.
It was so great to see all of you. I appreciate your willingness to serve, and I look forward to reconvening around upcoming AHAC work plan activities. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.